see a couple of new faces. I see a couple of new faces to this program, but people I know. So if I'm pointing at you, you know it, and some familiar faces. So excited to have you guys back. It is a different Tuesday than we normally do. And there's some discussion about the fact that we've had these for a couple of years on the third Thursday or third Tuesday, which means there's some folks who always can't get here. And so do we want to change it up to the second Tuesday for a little while? And I think without too much objection, we probably will do that for 2023, see how it works. So let me know if you think that that's a terrible idea, but otherwise the second Tuesday will probably become our night, at least for the next year. So we're coming off of national session. It's exciting because we're done with it and we haven't yet started talking about the next one. No, but realistically, it is one of the better times of year for us because, we get together and have the fraternal time. Your staff gets to see you and hear from you and get reminded that there are actually people out there who are as passionate about this thing as we are. And so it's a good 10 days for us long, stressful, but good. And we always kind of come back with a bunch of new ideas and projects and things. Pete gets enough phone calls from any one of us about all the crazy ideas that we've come home with, or the reverse. And so it's a kind of fun month thereafter. And I wanted to just do a couple quick recap things from session. If you were able to catch any of it online through Facebook Live or YouTube, that is Phil over there, who's going to wave to you now, who was handling that with our communication fellows. And I see at least one or two of them in the room. And so they did a great job of bringing pieces of session to your living rooms, so you didn't have to travel all the way to Sparks. A couple of the things that we didn't get to put up on any of the live streams this year for the first time in, I don't know that anybody's told me they've seen it before. We were able to do the first 5 degrees at session. We did that because we were in Nevada. We have a lot of new folks out there who've never seen any of the degree work. And we found out that some of our delegates in our room had never seen 1 through 4, especially. So it was just interesting to do. We did a shortened form. I thought that was kind of a lot of fun and different. Obviously, we had our traditional Evening of Excellence, which is our talent show. If you've never seen one of those, it's still on YouTube. You can go see it. We have a lot of talent in the Grange. We really get excited to show that off. We had our Evening of Honors where we gave a lot of awards out to different folks, some who knew it and some who didn't. I kind of think it's fun when we surprise people. And so we were able to do that a little bit this year. And you'll see some of that coverage. You've probably already seen it in the Patrons Chain, which is our newsletter, but you'll probably see some more of it in our Good Day magazine. And I'll have Phil talk about that in a minute. You saw people running around like crazy as delegates, as volunteers, as officers, and as fellows, trying to get the work of the convention done. And then a whole lot of the good stuff that we were talking about, the fellowship, whether it be at the bars or at the slots or in the more appropriate places, right? In the lobbies and things like that. We had 23 resolutions that passed out of, I think, the 84 that came to us. They were in all different committees, but you might have heard me say that labor, judiciary, and transportation did not adopt any new policies. That doesn't mean that the policy in that area didn't change. Each committee is given their policy a little bit in advance of convention, and they're able to look through it and see if they still think that everything that's in there is relevant. Our legislative assistant provides some background information, especially if there's things that have already passed or they're kind of moot issues or whatever. So the committees kind of clean up some of the policy that's there. And then they have their discussions about the things that have come forward from you guys. So this year, the Ag Committee had a couple of resolutions that they adopted, specifically using the word bioengineered in place of GMO or genetically engineered. They thought that was a more accurate term when discussing stuff. Something from Maryland on ag education, specifically on funding for ag education initiatives. They had a policy on agricultural fertilizer. So obviously how it's made and where it's made is important because we have a lot of farmers who are running into issues with not only the price of it, but the availability. And then funding for food bank distribution centers, which ends up in the agriculture committee because most of you know the Farm Bill, which is up for review and reauthorization or rewriting really, is up into 2023, and 80% or so of the funding in the Farm Bill goes to food and nutrition programs. So that's why food bank distribution center stuff came into the Ag Committee. As far as citizenship and taxation committee, and if you're thinking, wow, I don't know where that is in my state, Grange, what committee that is, your state might have a little bit of a different name for it, but they all work together. They had veterans preference for low income housing that they adopted, Arlington National Cemetery eligibility requirements, Social Security benefits for terminally ill, unfair personalized pricing. They don't want to see the drug companies be able to price things based on race, gender, background, socioeconomics, all the things that people could find out about you if they're tracking you online, all that fun stuff. They had a resolution about testifying before Congress, and I don't remember what that one was. So if any of you were on citizenship and taxation, I want to jump in with that for a second. If not, there'll be a little recap of that in the Good Day magazine as well. Removing medical debt from credit bureau reports, and banning stock trading for federal legislators while in office. So those are all committee resolutions or resolutions that came from our members that were adopted there. There were 3 adopted in conservation, reevaluating our nation's energy sources, the enhancement and standardization of climate-related disclosures for investors, and solar and alternative energy placement incentives. So same thing, you'll have a little bit of a recap in our upcoming materials, and if you want to read those more in depth, you can get a copy of those. All right, and so last thing was Education and Health Committee. They adopted a couple things, prescription drug price controls, Q fever. I am still very confused as to what Q fever is. Healthcare price transparency, keeping foreign baby formula makers on the United States markets, and opposed to use of pharmacy benefit managers. So again, and one more, sorry, multi-cancer early detection, and then the White House Conference on Hunger, Health, Nutrition. So those were all part of that. If you want to read any more, we've got the full policies that you can read. They'll be in our policy book. And so now is when I'm going to ask Phil. The JOP, which is the book that tells you what happened at our convention, gives you kind of an overview of our year, and gives you all of the policies of the Grange. That is coming out soon.
Hopefully end of January. I'm still waiting on a few state presidents to get me their reports. I'm sitting here as this meeting's happening. I'm putting the final touches on the January edition of Good Day magazine. So as soon as this leaves my house, hopefully tomorrow afternoon, then I will be shifting my full attention to the Journal of Proceedings. I do know that Sean has been cleaning up our policy, making sure that everything's ready for me to start plugging in. And as soon as Debbie and Martha get me the minutes from the week, I'm ready to roll.
Nice.
So, but the JOP should be completed hopefully mid-January, honestly, as that'll take up most of my attention at the beginning of the year.
All right. So I've run down a little bit of convention. We've had a little bit of fun tonight. Before we move into the second part of the night, which I know is probably what is more interesting, frankly, than anything I could be talking about, I wanted to ask you if you had any questions about National Convention, how policy stuff works, or anything else that you might have heard or seen from National Session, besides the fact that we had a membership gain that we got to announce, which I've announced like on here 6 times, so whatever.
We can still cheer about it.
Absolutely. Anybody? Okay, well, if you have questions, chime in. This is interactive. I'm sorry that a lot of times it ends up getting front loaded with me talking a lot. So the the other thing I guess I just want to announce is that Q3, which is the start of the new membership year, according to the National Grange calendar, we had a net gain in membership again. So this is not a fluke. Right, Pete? He's only half paying attention.
No, I got you. I heard it's not a fluke. It's not a fluke.
It's not. We're very excited. And that's thanks to the work that you guys are doing. A lot of that work, comes by some of our members who have been members for a long time, talking about Grange in very positive ways, and helping people who are new to Grange, figure out what all of this strange, crazy stuff is. But it also comes down to our new members bringing a lot of excitement in and ideas and really taking their communities' needs seriously. And so for no matter where you are in that spectrum, thank you. Tonight, I wanted to share the program with Scott Nicholson. Scott is at least next to me in my boxes, but I'll have him wave for a second. Here you go. Scott is from Montana, and he is their membership director and state program director, lecturer, depending on which way you look at that. He's also a past president in Montana. Montana was the largest net gain percentage-wise in the nation, state-wise. Last year, they had like a 37% net gain or something insane like that. And I attribute a lot of that to the work that Scott did after, really kind of getting called to action. So I'll let him introduce what happened with the Grange that he has been working with to revitalize, not officially reorganized. For those of you who are kind of unclear on the terms, there's new Granges, they're brand new, probably in new communities where we haven't been before. There's reorganized Granges. There was a Grange there at one time. It has a name and a number. It may even still have a hall, but it has officially closed. There are no more members in that Grange. And a new group, or sometimes a group that's a few of the people who had been in the Grange and a new bunch come in and they reorganize it. And then in this case, in Scott's case, they had a revitalized Grange. So they were down to just a few members. There were some new people who came in and, brought a torch of light in, and they have gone from kind of sluggish to doing some amazing things. So, Scott, I wanted you to talk a little bit about what that was like, how that kind of came about, and then a little bit about, how you specifically took people from entering the door to becoming Grangers. And then if you all have questions, I know Scott's good at taking questions in the midst of things. So feel free to just raise your hand or stop things and I will try and field questions.
Okay. The Grange I've worked most closely with, we have basically two Granges in the state that have gone from what I'll call a property management Grange. The members that were still on the rolls were there to keep the building available. That's it. The one that I'm working with the most closely is the neighboring Grange, who we for many years at Corvallis Grange were kind of in the shadow of our big brother down the roads 12 miles that was a huge Grange. And part of the dynamics that have made both the two reorganized Granges in or revitalized Granges in Montana work was that either there were very few old Grangers left, and the ones that were there in the Grange north of us, the last guardians of the Grange were very willing to step back and let the new folks pretty much run with it. Early on in Rocky Mountain Grange, which is our neighbor Grange, they had a couple of I would call them old timers, but they were Grange members in name only, that tried to throw a lot of monkey wrenches in the works. I was very fortunate that they brought in a couple of people that mostly interested in using the building, who all of a sudden said, now wait a minute, this is a real thing. And I pretty much, the whole cast and characters had no idea about Grange. And part of the thing that I really must emphasize, because I've been doing this kind of thing for years, and we have a tendency sometimes to push too much Grange on them too fast. In the case of the other revitalized Grange, you try to bring in Montana, you try to bring Grange stuff in, and they've said, no, well, this is not what we signed up for. You guys are just a cult. And I think the folks working with those folks up there tend to push too much Grange too fast. I always start simple because I attend the whole meeting. I kind of get a feel as the meeting kind of wraps up and they are ready to call on me, how impatient the folks are to wrap this up and get going on to other things. I'm very fortunate that this new crop of people, when I first started teaching a little degree work, were like, oh, cool. What does that mean? And being able to apply it to what they're experiencing and into their daily lives, which all of them, the kind of the focus that ties them together, all of them are farmers market vendors and producers, small farmers. So, but I usually start very simple, teach them the salutation. Just teach them the salutation and maybe revisit the first degree just a little bit in that first section. And then I open it up for questions. Well, these guys are gobbling it up so fast. I went through my first 6 months in 2 meetings of what I had mapped out. The other thing that is a really positive tool is the Grange Heritage that Amanda has put together. It's very small bite-sized piece, and you can tell by the questions and how people respond to the one reading from whatever degree to how far you can go with that. And there, quite frankly, with Rocky Mountain Grange, there are nights that I participate in the meetings, kind of help them with their parliamentary procedure. And when it comes my time, everybody's packing up or we've run for 2 hours and everybody's just done. So, but there again, salutation and the use of the gavel are 2 places I start and work from there, keeping it as simple and small as possible. For those of us that have taken all 4 degrees or been a part of all 4 degrees in one day, you know how overloading that can be to what the mind can only endure so much. So anyway, that's a real quick thumbnail. I didn't prepare as much as I had planned to, but I figured your questions would lead us more what you're interested in and how we're doing things.
Do we have any questions?
You know me, I always have questions.
And this is why we keep you around, Pete.
That's it. So Scott, you said that it's Rocky Mountain Grange, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Their main focus was the farmers market. But what started the conversation of we want to revitalize this Grange? What was their purpose? What was their motivation?
Well, they had brought in about 6 or 8 new members because it had become a Grange of 2, and the people that they knew that they brought in that were willing to set up, quite honestly, my first lessons in the workings of the Grange, they were instantly able to apply to what they were interested in. The other thing of this group that's really become more the glue that holds them together is most of them are in their late 20s to their mid 40s. They like music and they like to eat and they like to sample different forms of distilled products or fermented products. And one of the yeah, so you take what that group. It was very hard for me, even in a previous being a longtime Grange member and very of the old school that yeah, we didn't break out a bottle, but until the meeting was over and we were back somewhere else outside of the Grange Hall. And you know, they had their dinner and they've got wine and that a couple of them are micro brewers, so they bring samples. And to go into a Grange Hall and have a potluck with spirits on the table, nobody, it's not,
During the
it's
meeting.
more a tasting thing as a tasting and sampling thing than it is a serious drinking thing.
So my next question, you have this group, and thanks for putting the ages out there, you know, 20s to 40s, obviously, who knew each other but didn't know each other. So now they're using this Grange forum as a way to, and you said it, as a way to get to know each other and what's our commonality and how can we all have a good time but also grow. And it's giving them a, for lack of a better term, a social circle they didn't have before.
That is
How-
correct.
How
And
big's the area they're in, Scott, and how many people, like in the, if there's a town, how many people?
you know, I don't know the exact numbers, but there's less than 1 million people in the state of Montana combined. So our county is twice the size of the state of Rhode Island to start with, the county, and there's 2 Granges. And I was going to finish up just to take this thought a little bit further. Twice a month, they have an open to the public. They bring in a local or semi-local musical act, and they call it Potlucks with a Purpose. And they have a dinner, they have music, and the profits of each one, they pick out a nonprofit to benefit. Like a couple of rotations ago, it was one of the local FFA chapters. Another time was the food bank. And that is part of what and when, for example, when they did the FFA, they increased their attendance by 1/3 because all of the chapter came to support and their parents. So, but they're getting 150, 200 people out to one of these.
How are they advertising those, Scott? What are they using?
Handbills and posters, and the community calendar on the Chamber of Commerce website, and their Facebook page, and their Instagram page. So, and depending on the music, now I didn't go to last Friday night this last week. I saw pictures of it. I'd intended on going, but we had to be up dark 30 for breakfast with Santa Claus at our Grange Hall. So I said no, not tonight. So anyway,
so they're getting a good buy-in in their community then.
They're getting a very good buy-in. Now the Grange that's to the north of us, almost 150 miles to the north of us, it is a town where there really is no town. The Grange Hall has always been kind of a glue that holds the community together. They got to go 15 miles one direction and 20 miles the other direction to buy a gallon of milk or a gallon of gas. So it's this community, and a lot of folks have moved there. We're growing so fast here. We call them COVID refugees, of folks that are seeking a smaller community, a community lifestyle, and that's a lot of what we're able to tap into.
I like two of those terms. I like potlucks with a purpose. John, hopefully you copied that down. We'll use that in New Jersey. And the other term you just used, community
Lifestyle.
community lifestyle.
And
That's
if
a great term.
there's actually a handbill, a copy of the handbill in this month's Montana State Grange News.
Excellent.
And so for those of you that don't get an email, if you go to the Montana Facebook page, Montana State Grange Facebook page, because in addition to the other hats I wear, I'm also the newspaper editor. I recently figured out how to get that news on Google Drive with a link that's published on our Facebook page. You can go direct and click on it and open up the newspaper. So, but yeah, there's a handbill for this season's potluck with a purpose included on there.
And you said they'll get 100, 150 people.
Yep. And oftentimes it depends on the musical group. The last one I went to was phenomenal. And the one before it was kind of like, well, oh well. Far. Okay. Any
So
other?
obviously-
Go ahead, Pete.
So obviously then, Scott, their membership's growing in different ways then.
Mhm.
Because the community is seeing, as I've said, and Amanda understands I get on this rant, but they're offering something that communities, as you said, a community lifestyle that people want. And the Grange is the organization supplying that, and people are seeing that.
Yep.
So, I'll be quiet for a
It's-
while.
Oh, and I've worked with a lot of struggling Granges in the past and some that are no longer with us. And that is a common theme. If you've got 2 or 3 people that's their Grange and they have veto power over everything. And those people threw up their hands and walked away. And I'll tell you, hey.
I think John's got his hand up, so I'll be quiet.
Yes,
Go,
John.
So do they charge an admission fee for the potluck, or do they just have a donation basket out?
It's a donation. They have basically 3 donation baskets. They have one for the gate. They have one for refreshments, usually of the liquid kind, because each time they have it, they also will showcase one of the local microbreweries who usually chips in a keg or a pony keg. They have a donation basket, and then they have a donation basket or a donation thing for the nonprofit that they are showcasing. And, I think, and that was the last Grange meeting, they had a huge discussion of they didn't think it was a good idea to leave the cash in the Grange Hall overnight. And that took up about 3/4 of their meeting, saying, okay, what do we do with the money? Who's, but I think, I know, like the night of the Stevensville FFA, which is a town further down, I think they raised almost $1,000 for that group, mostly donations. So, anyway,
Wayne
so-
has her hand up. Wayne, if you unmute yourself and want to ask your question.
Amanda, it's not really a question, but I did want to say I love Scott's comment on the two old codgers that quit. Hickory Grange that we were able to revitalize or reorganize, however you want to classify it here in Pennsylvania. I got a phone call from their new president shortly after that they had a person who every meeting was trying to cause trouble. He was not a Granger, was not a former Granger. And so I suggested to them that they go back to using the password for a couple meetings. And of course, he didn't have the password, so he wasn't allowed in the building. And after 2 or 3 meetings, he stopped trying to come, and they went back to an open meeting, and it was very successful. So you're right, and a lot of times I like Pete's comments, addition by subtraction.
Yeah, you would be surprised at how many people seem to think that even though we're a private organization, that we are somehow a public entity because our building is used so publicly, our buildings are used so publicly, and they think that they have a right to ask for the books, ask for the minutes, et cetera, when they're not members. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be somewhat transparent, but not to the detriment of our ability to function. So yeah, I like that. Any other questions?
Go
All right,
ahead,
Scott, I have a question for you.
Oh, Jamie has her hand up.
Oh, Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi. To your point, Amanda, is people seeing us as a public entity. I call my Grange econ community the best known secret on the hill, because everyone knows us, but no one knows us.
Okay.
So because everyone knows us by, we have our hall rentals, we have our dinners, and we have all this, but they don't know us for what we do behind the scenes, like our meetings and
right.
all of our other communities, that our outreach programs we do that we don't like to publicize because it's more personal, because we help some families in need around towns. So we're not going to share that, but we're the best kept secret on the hill.
Nice. Nice. So I'm going to just ask Scott, does that Grange use a card reader, a Stripe, a Swipe, a something to take donations, or is this all cash?
Most on music night or on potluck with a purpose night, it's free will, dump it in the basket. They do, I know that they do have the means to take, because a lot of their hall rentals are actually done through PayPal or Venmo, because they do a lot of their building rental throughout online booking. They don't, we still, down the road at Corvallis Grange, you need to call the hall manager and book it and bring them a check, and we don't. So they're younger, and they're a little bit more tech savvy than some of the rest of us.
I'm actually surprised they don't have a card reader of some sort there that I can just, use my Wi-Fi card and plunk in a donation.
I will bring that up at the next meeting.
I was surprised.
They're the kind of group. They're the kind of group that they'll figure it out. I mean,
Yeah.
if they think it's an advantage.
So the next question I have is, I see at least 3 of us maybe on here that are in this age group, this late 20s to 40s age group. Am I right? Yeah. 4 of us maybe. I'm not sure. So let me ask you guys, does this resonate with you as far as not just the potlucks with a purpose, not just their events, but the way in which you introduce Grange slowly and in a way that's bringing some of these essential pieces in as just a component of the meeting instead of overwhelming part of the meeting? Vic, you've been with us this whole time. You've been nodding, so I'm going to go to you because I already heard from Jamie and, well, Phil's Phil.
Well, My name is Vic. I am from Washington State. I am the lecturer and family living for Roy Grange 702 in Pierce County, promoter number 16. So our Grange is really small, and we're just trying to start with events and get people knowing that the Grange is still there. Many people I'm learning in town, they drive past our building and don't even know that's a Grange Hall, what it is. So that's where we're trying to start, just by reestablishing ourselves and letting people know this is the building where you can come for, like you said, for community, for building it and creating that safe space for people to come and go, yeah, I can come, and how to relate the degree work to our daily lives. So we're a few steps behind, but taking notes so when we get there quickly, we know how to keep them engaged.
Nothing wrong with being a few steps behind. You're here, you're getting there. It's good. And there's a whole community of a whole bunch of us who would be happy to toss you ideas. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
One of the other comments I'll make.
Yes, be excited to get them.
Yeah. Well, and a potluck with, bringing in a local musician and having an open house it would make a really good start, I would think. But I will also want to make a comment about this group, that they oftentimes have a jam afterwards, but one of the guys got so already into the spirit of Grange is he has been digging up picked up the patron and started learning the songs, and to the point, thankfully he was a delegate for their Grange at our state session, and he was able to help with the music department, and he found some old songs that were like in a Vermont or Maine state Grange dating back to the 1800s songbooks, and actually he learned them and performed them. So it just an amazing group to be. It's a fun group to work with, I gotta say.
I think what's powerful about the story that I've gotten to hear over these months, and shortened version that you've gotten to hear tonight, is that there is a group that was looking for something like us. Wasn't scared away by who we were, but it was partially because of the approach. We've talked in previous sessions about the fact that different generations take basically sales pitches differently, and the generation that he's talking about that's here is not one to do high pressure sales, or not one to do something that feels overwhelming, because so many other things in life are overwhelming, right? And so that slow roll into what Grange is was perfectly married for them, and what they were looking for perfectly married with who we are. And so as he introduced some of the stuff about Grange slowly, it whetted the appetite so much that they sunk their teeth in. It's more so than if you just handed everything to them on a buffet and said, this is everything we are. And so I wanted to note that I think that was one of the most powerful parts of the way in which Scott kind of rolled out talking to them. And, obviously the ability to read people and know when too much is too much, and when, there's a desire for more, and not requiring that everything be known or perfect from the very beginning. I'm sure that you probably went, no, you don't sit there at least 2 or 3 times, but kind of kept your mouth shut and said, okay, they'll get there when we get to that part of this, right?
Exactly. And not be critical when they actually get doing Grange ritual and degree. Don't be overly critical. Just let them flow with it. Let them learn it. Let them try it before they buy it, kind of thing. That old curmudgeon in the corner that says, no, you did that wrong. That turns that age group off, turns anybody off real fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I expect that we're going to have a question from Rob, only because they've had 2 Granges reorganized here in the past couple of months. One earlier this week, well, late last week, who's going to slow roll into this stuff too, I think, in a state that Rob, I'm just gonna say it. You guys are really known for being kind of hardcore ritualists up there in the Northeast.
Yeah.
But I think I'm sitting with two people who can understand that sometimes bashing people over the head with it isn't quite the way to go about it anymore. So I expect that you have a question or two for Scott that might lead you to success with your new Granges there, Reading and Wallingford.
Comments, actually. Everything, Scott, that you said kind of resonated, because in my experience, one of the biggest turnoffs was the old dyed-in-the-wool Grangers bashing you over the head because, you know, when you got up to the altar and, you know, if you were the lady assistant steward, and you turned the wrong way as you were heading back to your seats, you know, and you got laid out in lavender basically in the middle of everybody else for, you know, doing the wrong turn. It just, or the flag presentation was another one. You know, you didn't line up yourselves correctly, and you got castigated in front of these superb ritualists. It's a fault of the Grange. Instead of just trying to instruct gently, to insult. You know, that's the only way I can say it. It's not the way to go. And your approach, I after almost 35 years in the Grange, I have come to that conclusion that that's the way to go. You know, you gently guide, but you don't bash people in the head for doing it wrong. I did want to mention a few things about Wallingford. My special deputy, Don Lanou, that I appointed a couple of weeks ago to look over and guide Wallingford and mentor them. We have 28 new members, brand new members, one of whom has a connection to the Grange. She is the grand niece of Mildred Bell, who was honored in the memorial service, having died earlier this year. But she never belonged to the Grange before. We sent the lady who spearheaded Reading Grange's reorganization over to Wallingford, and there was a meeting which I was unable to attend in their public library. And however they publicized the reorganization of the Grange on short order, they had an outstanding outpouring of public interest once these people found that this organization, some of which they didn't know a lot about it, they knew it was something in town, but they didn't all have a wide appreciation of exactly what it was. They came to this meeting, and as a result of that and all the publicity that was done, we have 28 new members, totally new. As far as I can see, I don't think there's a good chance that any of the previous Wallingford Grange members are going to come back. There's maybe one or two that might, but I'm not too optimistic that they will. I'm not sure of the one has since gone to a neighboring Grange, and the other I'm not sure of his intentions. So, but they're positive. They're just the most positive group of people. And I'm currently working with another Grange who's going through a bit of turbulent times and having a bit of reorganization in the town just to north of us. Bridgewater. I'm going over there to install their new master president. They like the traditional terms. Excuse me for using the word master, but that's tomorrow night. And in Eastern Connecticut, we have the prospect of reorganizing, rejuvenating a couple of other Granges as well. So Patchogue Grange and Lime Grange. But I believe in Connecticut, we are moving in a positive direction, and I've rambled sufficiently. Thank you. And
Amanda, I just wanted to jump in and say I dropped in the chat a bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly/Grange brochures. Will take you to a folder that is full of free brochures that you are able to use in your Granges. The two especially that I want to point out is there's one called Sneak Peek brochure and there's one called Degrees and Symbols. These would be great if you're introducing ritual a little bit at a time, if you're introducing information about the Grange and our ritual work and who we are and what we stand for from a historical perspective. These are great resources that you can use, and you're able to print them out at home. They're PDFs, so you're able to download them and put them in. Yes, Amanda, I will do that. So you can also use bit.ly/Grange heirloom, which I'm going to put in right now, which will take you to the heirloom program. We're going to be entering year 2 of the heirloom program here in just a couple of months, and the brochure for that will also be printed in the next issue of Good Day magazine. So you can subscribe to that at nationalgrange.org/goodday. But these are great resources for you to be able to introduce a little nugget at a time. That for the heirloom is usually less than a paragraph in that program, for you to bring up in your meetings to talk about anything from how our acts of service work to how membership works, are the way that we kind of follow the seasons through our ritual work. That's all enclosed in the Grange heirloom. In these brochures, you're able to put them out. So if you're having that event, if you're having, the potluck with a purpose, these kind of things at your Grange, make sure to have some of these brochures readily available. So when somebody asks you, what is the Grange? Of course, you should have your elevator pitch ready for them to give you the 30-second digestible version, but then also say, I have this literature here for you. If you want to take some, feel free to read it. If you have questions, here's my phone number, give me a call, send me an email. I'm happy to work with you on this stuff. If you don't have a printer at home, you can also order bundles of these through the Grange store. They're relatively cheap. They mostly just cover shipping, really. So if you want to order them through the Grange supply store, they're available there as well. But I just thought that this would be a great way for us to continue the conversations. It's awesome to get people into our halls. It's great to get people coming to our events. And some of these Granges have seen great revitalization from starting in that way and then starting the conversation. And this is just a really easy, free way for you to start that conversation that will hopefully keep going and building these Granges.
Can I say one more thing, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we focus on revitalizing, reorganizing, but I think you've also seen Granges that are established have grown.
Yeah.
Because of what's going on and how Granges have opened their doors and they're reaching out to the community, and I see more Granges having just open community nights, inviting the community into the Grange Hall. And there was one, I believe was, I'm gonna get this wrong, Washington State, Oregon, that for 4 nights in a row, they just had hot chocolate out at the Grange Hall, have people stop by and just have a cup of hot chocolate. So I think we've seen, and Amanda, you're the one who could attest to this, strong established Granges have grown also.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that, you anecdotally hear over and over is what Scott kind of started out saying, which was a lot of times the people who are the established Grangers who have been the establishment in that Grange have to be willing to say, I am confident enough in myself and what I've been able to do and accomplish here to step back when someone else has an idea, and let them run with it, or let them take a leadership position or whatever. Because not doing that, I mean, there are not an unlimited amount of things or there's not a limited amount of things that there used to be. For people to join. There's an unlimited amount of ways that people can make a difference now. And if you're not tickling the sweet spot that they need, to make themselves feel good about the time and energy and money that they may be putting into something, they'll go take that time and energy and money and the human resources and knowledge resources with them somewhere else. So, so those Granges that are growing, that are established, really have a leadership core that said it's okay for us to step back and let the next generation bring this Grange, ahead. So I want to figure out how to talk more about that with our established Grange members without it sounding like an attack. And I don't know that we've found that exact rhetoric that works.
So Amanda, my phrase is institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
We have these things that Grange members know because they've done them for a long time. And if we want the Grange to succeed for future generations, it's imparting that knowledge and passing on the knowledge and letting the next group take over. It's what happens in the White House every 4 or 8 years. While you might not love who you're handing over the reins to, you're required to. And so you have to at some point say, our group knows this, your group needs to know this, and you're going to have to start passing it over. Because I think what we've seen, the reasons that some Granges do die out is because their members haven't passed on any of that institutional knowledge that they gained as children, potentially. They haven't, embraced the future. So they've aged with the Grange, and unfortunately they die with the Grange and the Grange dies with them because they were the last keepers of the knowledge. And that's not just in the ritual, and it's not just in the history, but it's also in the way that some Granges have these established events that happen every year, and the same people do them over and over again. So it's passing on the knowledge of how do we run this fair? How does, our dance work that we have every December? These kind of events is passing on that institutional knowledge and encouraging people to step up and take over. And also at some point, I've heard some people say, I've done my time, I need somebody to take over now. And letting people take over by necessity, saying, I've been here, I've put in my 25, 30, 40, 50 more years, and letting other people start, to run the show.
I think I guess the one thing I get worried about, this is just, sorry, this is like a conversation that we have on like Wednesday night at national session after 2 or 3 glasses of wine. But the thing that I worry about when I see these things happening, that the membership is aging and not bringing in new folks and not passing on that institutional knowledge and stuff, is that you also see how quickly their programming is aging, their outreach is aging and stuff like that. And so it's not just that the Grange is going to term out, is going to pass on without that, that transition of knowledge and things like that. It's that you're watching it happen slowly in front of you, because dictionaries, the Words for Third is an amazing program, and in some communities that really still works. And when it started, it worked everywhere. But the internet is so much a thing in some communities, not everywhere. That's the places where this still works. But there are some areas that everybody has it. There's free systems. We're even talking about the lowest income people in that community have access. And so the dictionaries don't work anymore there, but some Granges will still hold on to them. That's just an example, but you can see this with the way in which they still run meetings that have, skits in them, or they might do certain, programs or fundraisers that nobody's coming to because that's not what anybody wants. They're selling doilies that are crocheted. And I love the people who can crochet, but I don't want a crochet doily. All it is a dust catcher. And so you watch these things happening in front of your eyes almost and you can bet, when you see that there's a crochet doily fundraiser, that Grange is filled with folks who don't want to pass on any of that institutional knowledge. And you can almost, write on the tombstone already for them. And I guess I don't know where to go once you see that there's a resistance to that change. But yeah, it's certainly something.
Well, it almost comes down to permission. Some senior member needs to give their permission to make this happen. And as you have said, Amanda, it's such a good statement. The Granges that realize, we need to do something different. If we're going to make it, we got to do something different. Those are the Granges that are really doing well. But
And if
Yeah,
I
Scott.
may, one of the kind of ways I sneakily kind of get people to maybe step back is use the term mentor. You need to be mentoring these new folks. And I often quote my grandfather, who used to say, the sign of a good leader is knowing when to sit down and shut up and back off. And I practice that a lot in my life nowadays.
There's a great t-shirt.
That's a really good point, Scott, because the Granges that are going to move ahead, if they're going to keep their older members, the older members have to realize that to accept the younger members, you've got to let those younger people do what they want some way in the way that they want, and using the methods and events and things that appeal to them, and not that the older folk force their ways on the younger members. There's got to be that evolution.
There has to be evolution. But I find sometimes when you're dealing with egos of not wanting to turn loose, that suggesting, instead of shut up and sit down, say, can you mentor those folks a little more and maybe let them run? Because mentoring is seen as a honorary, it's a positive term as opposed to so
Yeah, we may have
if
to have some more workshops on being good mentors, where you're staying positive and where you're not just taking over everything and that type of thing, before we ask a lot of these folks to take on mentor roles. But I think I think you're right. I think that is the solution for getting folks to know that they're leaving a lasting legacy, because it truly will last beyond that.
And I know she's
Amanda.
gone, but sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
With Econc, out of our 13 officers, 4 of us are under the age of 35.
Nice.
Fortunately, but unfortunately, a lot of our traditionalists have either passed away or aren't able to come to the meetings. And I'm trying to plan it out, but I'm actually going to work with our junior Grange, who is very active, and do a mentor program with them.
Nice.
Where we meet, they either come to a meeting or we go to their meeting and we sit with them. So like me being president, I would sit with the president of the junior Grange, and I would watch how she would do it. And then the next meeting, she would watch how I do it. So they could see how we run it compared to how they run it. So it's more or less, all right, so now I know what this is. Now I want to go for it. Where I grew up with my father. Everyone knows my father. So he was more my role model because of just who he is in the Grange. And I have a lot through state Grange that are also, and I wouldn't be sitting in the position I am now if a lot of those traditionalists were still there. I'm kind of glad that a lot of the traditionalists aren't there, because I am the first female steward of the Connecticut State Grange.
Which was a big flap, or at least it was a couple years ago, when they didn't know whether or not to make you lady assistant, because that might knock you out of line. I was so confused at the fact that there was a state Grange debating whether or not to take her from gatekeeper to assistant steward, which is where they'd always been, or lady because she's a lady, because you couldn't have 2 ladies walking next to each other. It was pretty amazing to see exactly how traditional Connecticut could be at that moment, as people were falling out of their wheelchairs trying to do a drill. Like
Years ago, In regards to that issue of women in our state lineup, because we had none, I actually believe I put a resolution in that I thought we ought to actually consider putting a woman into our lineup so that one day we would come into the new century and have a state president who was a woman. And the daughter of one of our previous state presidents, it was Pat Grandy, actually was heard in the elevator by my wife to be laughing at my suggestion that anybody would bring up such a subject. And
They're in the wrong organization. 1867, folks.
Yeah. And it's funny because that lady who I've known since I was little, part of the Wetmore family, who was Dwayne Wetmore was the state president, then master, who gave my parents and I the 6th degree. And we knew him, since I was a little kid because we all went to the same church together, blah, blah, blah. And here was his daughter, poo-pooing the idea, because I think she herself would have made a great state president because she was very Grange oriented and very, very intelligent, strong-willed. I don't know. It just blew me away when my wife said, and you know what Pat just said? I was like, oh, jeez.
And yet somehow we're all still here loving this thing.
Yeah.
As crazy as this is, we're all still here loving this thing. So I guess it's not so bad that we have our debates, but
no, I'm overjoyed to see woman Jamie there
Jamie
entering the lineup, because when her father preceded me as state president, and I used to think Jody was so young, and come to find out not so many years ago, he's only like 5 years younger than I am.
56.
Yeah, I'm 61. And here I thought he was a young whippersnapper.
Where to go? All right, guys. So it is 9:45. Normally I stay on a lot longer and extra in case y'all want to talk. Unfortunately, I have to be up at 3:30 to take my dad in for a procedure tomorrow. So I'm going to cut us so that I can get some sleep. I'm looking forward to doing this again the second Tuesday of January.
This is great. I'm glad I chimed in.
I'm glad you finally came.
One.
Yeah, I'm glad you finally came. We've only been doing it for a couple of years, Rob, but it's all right.
I know. I'm a late catcher honor.
It's okay. So in the meantime, if you guys have suggestions for any topics or any guest presenters, please let me know. I want to thank Scott and Phil for jumping on tonight. Scott, thank you for all of your insight onto how that revitalization worked. So.
And if anybody has any questions or wants to go into it a little deeper, I'm very findable. So
thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you in a month. In the meantime, membership at nationalgrange.org. Pretty much everybody has my cell phone number. And if you have any suggestions, I will take them. And we'll see you soon. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, all of the things that you might be celebrating. Celebrate with you. So.